Who was the only Jedi Master, or Force wielder for that matter, to wield a brown lightsaber in all of the lore? Greetings again, Acolytes, and welcome back to the archives. The subject of kyber crystals and the varying types of lightsaber colors is one that's revisited frequently by many scholars of a galaxy far, far away. Anytime we come across a strange color, we just can't help but analyze its possible meanings and significance. Well, today, we bring you a rather bizarre one. During the ancient days of the Jedi Order, there was a master of a rare species by the name of Ood Bnar, and in his time, he wielded the only known brown lightsaber that we are aware of in the entirety of the lore. Master Bnar was a member of the Neti, a long-lived race that evolved from trees. They were, in essence, living plant people, which were often force-sensitive and high in tune with the light side. Those of you familiar with the channel will recognize this as being the species of Master Tre Sa, the female Neti, which trained Mace Windu. But Master Bnar was a very interesting and unique Jedi indeed, and his particular studies as a master may reveal why he had a brown kyber crystal. But before we begin, we have had a premonition in the Force. Many individuals that have used our archives have not yet subscribed to our order, so if you've been enjoying the daily Star Wars Holocron uploads, reach out and crush that subscribe button. It is your destiny. We have foreseen it. But back to Master Bnar and his brown crystal. Due to the extremely long life of a Neti, it is difficult to say exactly when Master Bnar was born, but he was originally from the planet of Reich, but was stranded on his people's native world of Merkur, where he would grow into young adulthood. At some point, he was eventually found by the Jedi Order and brought in for training, discovering his high force sensitivity. By 5000 BBY, Ood Bnar had become a Jedi Knight, where he observed the events of the Great Hyperspace War. We say observed because he was one of those who didn't participate. However, he did find a passion which would shape his studies as a Jedi. This would be the study of the Sith and the dark side. Master Bnar became a scholar, and would eventually become the understudy of Master Ood Bnar, another long-lived Jedi who fought during the war against Naga Sadow. Master Bnar worked with Ood Bnar in the archives, gathering and studying the history and all knowledge pertaining to the Sith Order. Interestingly, Ood Bnar never felt any sort of pull to the dark side in any form from his studies. Oftentimes in lore, our stories begin with a Jedi with a fascination in the dark side, with them eventually turning to it and embracing it fully. But Master Ood Bnar never felt anything from his studies, making him one of the most unique Jedi scholars in all of history. As a Neti, he possessed an incredibly rare ability which allowed him to completely sever himself from the subject matter that he was studying. By approaching the Sith lore from a place of complete disconnection, he was quite literally deaf to the dark side, while still being able to comprehend and understand it. As a result of these groundbreaking studies, Ood Bnar became a revered Jedi within the Order, and soon he would be the go-to source for any Jedi that required information about the dark side. While nothing of a fighter himself, and a self-proclaimed poor military tactician, Ood Bnar was always eager to share his knowledge with other Jedi so that he could be useful in the fight against the dark side and its affiliates in some degree. During this time in galactic history, knowledge of the dark side and the Sith was extremely rare. The only run-ins the Jedi had with such things was back during the Second Great Schism, and a few times the Sith Order had returned since then, including Naga Sadow's invasion. So they encountered dark acolytes, or when the Jedi had to go take care of Freed and Nad, they would heavily rely on Ood Bnar's knowledge in order to prepare. Along with his studies into Sith lore, Ood Bnar was also very familiar with kyber crystal science. He was one of the masters in charge of the study along with Ood Bnar. In fact, rare crystals weren't something that was strange to Ood Bnar. Apparently, he had once gifted his apprentice, Shaylay Nur, a Solari crystal, one that could be used in her own lightsaber. At the time, the Solari crystal was the rarest and the most powerful Jedi kyber crystal that had ever been discovered, producing a light orange blade. The Solari crystal could only be used by a Jedi who was pure in spirit, an adherent follower of the light side only. It could not be corrupted by the dark side, and its owner had to always stay pure of heart in order for the lightsaber to function. By the very fact that Ood Bnar once possessed this crystal in his own saber proves that there was no trace of the dark side within him despite all of his studies into the Sith culture. I think this perfectly brings us around to the crystal known as Bnar's sacrifice, which is the brown kyber crystal that got our attention in the first place in the lore. Ood very rarely ever used a lightsaber, and for a long time after he gave his Solari crystal away, he didn't even own a lightsaber. But it seems while he never actually used this brown crystal in his own lightsaber, he still had a great love for the crystals, and so he possessed and had imprinted upon it, even though he would never place his crystal in a lightsaber. And fascinatingly, the crystal turned brown. Bnar's sacrifice, like the Solari crystal, could only ever be used by those who were pure of heart and adamant followers of the light. But this kyber had one other unique property to it. Whoever uses this crystal in their lightsaber would be bonded to it forever, and the crystal could be used by no other. Ood Bnar would leave this crystal behind as his legacy to any who could come after him, which means that he never used it within his own lightsaber, but wanted someone else to use it in his place for the sake of the Jedi. The meaning of the brown crystal is a curious one, but it's one that we may be able to decipher by studying Master Bnar himself. The hand that wields Bnar's sacrifice must be one who is pure-hearted and rooted in the light, but they must have a willingness to understand the nature of the dark side without being tempted to use it, or even come close to corruption. It would require a kind of iron will which only comes around every couple thousand years. Only the most special of Jedi could properly use this brown crystal. But on the subject of the crystal's name, it is a tragic one which is appropriately tied to Master Bnar's ultimate fate. Ood would live until 3996 BBY, being an instrumental help during the Great Sith War against one Exar Kun. Master Bnar provided much required knowledge and advice during the battle with the dark side, and the Jedi were lucky to have him around as the dark side returned to the galaxy in grand fashion. But despite his best efforts, Ulic Qel-Droma still would eventually turn to the dark side, and Bnar's best friend, Odan would eventually be killed directly by Exar Kun. Ood would succeed as the Master of the Archives for a short while, until the Battle of Ossus. After the 10-sun Kron cluster would be destabilized by Exar, he invaded Ossus to quickly gather as many Jedi and Sith artifacts from the library as possible, plundering the Jedi's home before the supernova shockwave destroyed the surface of the Jedi's homeworld. Master Bnar was helping everyone get the Jedi knowledge evacuated from the planet when Exar would make his appearance in the archives. Ood was no fool and knew very well the limits of his own power and skill, and he had no chance against the mighty Sith Lord one-on-one. But he could not, and would not allow the Sith to get his hands on the collection of sacred Jedi lightsabers which resided in the archives, a fascination of Exar's. Ood Bnar would fend off Exar for a short while, doing his best just to dodge the Sith Lord's savage blows. Unfortunately though, Ood Bnar's basic knowledge of lightsaber combat could not stand up to the expertise of Exar Kun, and he was disarmed. However, Bnar held still and held all of the cards as he would activate his species' special trait, a trap he had laid perfectly. Growing over the lightsabers, he became a near indestructible tree, depriving Exar Kun of the sacred lightsaber collection that he so desired. Exar would be forced to flee, knowing that attempting to retrieve the lightsabers would be a waste of time. Master Bnar's old friend, Master Thawne, would communicate with him before the full evacuation, and the two Jedi Masters would share a solemn goodbye before Thawne eventually evacuated Ossus himself. The shockwave swept over the surface of the world and destroyed everything. However, Ood Bnar's tree actually withstood the explosion, and he slipped into hibernation over the lightsabers for thousands of years. The crystal, Bnar's sacrifice, was the only legacy that he left behind for one who may claim it years later. During his long slumber, those who were left on Ossus during the devastation began to hide underground, and once it was all over, they all had children, and their descendants would become the Yasana tribe. The Yasana people all grew up knowing the tale of Master Bnar and his tree, as this became a sacred location to them, naming it the Place of Ascension. And it was here where Ood Bnar would rest until he was found by Luke Skywalker in 10 ABY. Luke, who was helping the Yasana people against a dark Jedi. Despite having awoken from a several thousand-year-long slumber, Ood Bnar wasted no time and immediately helped Luke. Drawing upon the energies from the planet of Ossus through his very roots, Bnar would counteract a destructive ritual that the Dark Jedi had attempted, officially sacrificing his life in the process, and becoming one with the Force in its finality. This would be the end of Bnar's help. However, long ago, at the behest of Ood Bnar and Master Thrawn, Ood Bnar would create a holocron of his own, sharing all of the knowledge of the Sith, the dark side, and his knowledge of kyber crystals. This holocron would survive to the time of Luke Skywalker's Jedi Order, where its knowledge became invaluable to the future of the Jedi. However, it isn't exactly said who found and used the brown kyber crystal known as Bnar's sacrifice. So as far as we know, the brown lightsaber has yet to receive its forever master. So my friends, what do you think of the tale of Master Ood Bnar? These kind of Jedi are extremely important and rare to the overall growth of the Jedi Order, and I think perhaps more Jedi should invest time in learning the ability to completely disassociate from all subject matter that they research, and can learn a healthy amount about the Sith in the process. But let us ask you this question. Would you imprint upon Bnar's sacrifice, and would you be the one to wield the brown lightsaber? Let us know in the comments down below. And as always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the archives and the channel today, and may the Force be with you.